This is Josh Robbins with the Best Practices Show.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the Best Practice Show. Thank you guys for tuning in. We are crazy grateful with all the requests, feedback you guys give us. We're loving doing this, and I love the suggestions. We're going to do our best to get the best content on, and today is no exception. I got a fabulous one for you today, and today we're going to be talking about how dentists are leaving money on the table and how you can actually recapture about $500,000 to $1 million over the course of a career, so you do not want to miss this. Now, a couple show notes before I introduce my great guest that we have today that I'm crazy grateful to have on is we are shooting this live on Facebook. So as you're watching this, if you have questions, please add them to the feed and I'll ask our experts while they're on and get the answers straight from them. Also, if you're watching this later, because we're watching the metrics, a lot of you guys are watching this after hours and things like that, continue to add your questions to the feed and we'll get to those answers because we want you to get the most out of this. Now, my two guests today, I'm so crazy grateful. And I don't even know how I got connected to you guys, but it's amazing how the world of great friends and great information come together. Tom Zgainer, you are here, and then Josh Robbins, who I'm going to introduce in a second. And Josh, you're Tony Robbins' son, which I'm so excited for so many different reasons. But you guys got into this world of dentistry. I want to hear your story, and I also want to hear how you guys got involved in dentistry, and then take us on this journey. And then we're going to get into the details of how dentists can stay away from the trap of leaving all this money on the table. So tell me your story, both of you guys.
Josh, would you like to start?
Yeah, maybe I'll tell you how I got connected with Tom. I mean, I've been in financial services my whole life, and I ended up in 2008 when Tony and I were actually on a golf course. It was actually 2009, and it was after the financial crisis. We had this conversation about, hey, you know what? He wanted to set out to answer the question, is the game still winnable? He had just finished watching a really interesting documentary called The Inside Job. I don't know if you remember that, Kirk, but yeah. Matt Damon was the narrator, and it was really, you either finished that and you were either completely depressed or completely angry at what had just gone down with the financial crisis, and the reward for all the people who caused that, we put them right back in charge, right?
Right.
So he got really frustrated, and he said, you know what, I've got access to some of the greatest financial minds, and the ones I don't, I can get access to. He said, what if I decided to answer the question, is the game still winnable, by going out and interviewing 50 of the world's top financial minds, right? Everybody from Warren Buffett to Carl Icahn to Ray Dalio, Jack Bogle at Vanguard, you name it. The list goes on. And that was the origin of his first financial book called Money Master the Game. And Money Master the Game, went on to be #1 New York Times bestseller, kind of a modern day Think and Grow Rich, if you will. And that was how I was lucky enough to be on the research team. And as Tony went on these interviews, it kept coming back to, hey, if you want to make the biggest impact on the average individual's life, it's going to be in their 401k plan. 90 million Americans are in a 401k, more than own a home, to give you an idea. So it's the primary retirement vehicle for your listeners and, of course, their staffs. And that's where it's been the most egregious, situation. And as he started to explore this, we started to try to understand how big of an epidemic is this. What's the problem here? And to give you an idea, Kirk, for the first 30 years of the 401k plan's existence, I mean, it's only been around since like 83. Mm-hmm. So for the first 30 years, up until 2012, they didn't have to disclose to you how much they charged you in fees, how much they were taking out of your account. Wow. So we would never stand for this in any other, industry. Right? Can you imagine a dental practice? You walk in, you get a treatment, they say, "Don't worry about it. How much was that? Don't worry. We'll just take it out of your account."
Yeah, it's crazy.
This was absolutely crazy, and boy, did they take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we started to do some research, well, Tony said, "Hey, let's start looking around for, let's first look at my plan, and let's start looking around for a solution." And we came across a company called America's Best 401k. And Tom Zgainer is founder and CEO. And so we reached out to him and started to have that conversation. And so there's a lot that's transpired since, but I'll turn it over to Tom because it's his story as to how we reached out is as interesting and just as fun, and how it evolved from there has been amazing. And then we'll kind of talk about how we got into dentistry too. So go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, sure. And Kirk, just to preface a little bit before Tony's research, I had been in the business already for about 12 years, working for a couple of employers where my role was to help financial advisors across the country put a 401k plan in place for their clients. And it really started to gnaw at me, deeply gnaw at me, that these brokers and advisors truly thought that this was their 401k plan. Or to Josh's point, 25%, if not more, of someone's financial nest egg would be left on the table due to needless and excessive fees that just didn't have to be there. It was really all about one word: compensation to those brokers and advisors. Mm-hmm. So at the same time that the new fee disclosure rules came out, Josh referenced in August and July of 2012, for the first time this document came out that really gave an opportunity to look at optics and do a diagnosis. The problem with the disclosure were ostensibly they were to provide clarity into your fees. Now these documents, 15, 25, 50 pages, where one word on page 34 can change the complete complexion of the first 33. Right. So the same thing happened. Even though now there's a document to look at, nobody looked at it still today. So few people look at it, know where to find it, and articulate it. So it really became a wonderful opportunity to completely change this model, where the historical providers are kind of like aircraft carriers in the Erie Canal. They can't turn that thing around. They can't turn that boat around. So we came in very nimbly and created a new path. And to put it into perspective for the audience we're speaking to today, I checked this morning, nearly 34,000 dentists have 401k plans. 34,000. The collective assets of all those plans exceed $30 billion. Wow. So we're not talking about a potential little problem here. We're talking about a potential massive problem. So, talk about if you were to save a dentist over time $500,000 and we take that over all those plans out there, we're talking about a $12 to $15 billion putting back into people's pockets. Yeah. So even though your plan may be small, the collective total that we're speaking to all of those in dentistry is just absolutely massive. So when Tony got a hold of me, it was going through the same exact process with his own plan. It was a large plan, almost 300 participants, about $3.5 million in assets, with a big insurance company, a name brand insurance company that everybody knows. So the plan must be good. Mm-hmm. And then we started to do some digging, and we saw that his investment-related fees were about 1.86% all in. We'd be able to take that down into like 0.50. So the mathematical consequence of that and the effect on so many people's families was just massive. And so to that point, Tony and I first met then 4 or 5 months later. This is when his book, Money Master the Game, was starting to get its bones, so to speak. And then shortly thereafter, he asked me if I would want to be part of his social platform, essentially. That's Tony's whole thing, is ending suffering of all kinds. And lately, it's really been a focus on ending financial suffering. So we were featured in Money Master the Game, featured in Unshakable, and then I look back 9 years, I started writing on Dental Town as a retirement doctor, and it just crisscrosses. Your brethren sticks to each other through study groups, through the events they go to, the events they participate in, the little things they do in their communities. And so it's starting to share to where dentists can see that this problem is one that's very prevalent among the choices they've made. They've made choices of 401k providers oftentimes through people who they really like, which is great. There's great people behind it, right? Somebody who's a patient, somebody you met at Little League or church or school or what have you, and they're good folks, but they kind of fell into a plan that the etiology underneath the plan is not being looked at. And yet in dentistry, you're doing the watching, right? You're seeing what's going on in that mouth. You're watching what's going on. Is a small little issue going to lead to a root canal or to oral surgery that you could have taken care of early on? That's what we want to try to convey through today. There is etiology going on that needs to be addressed because this 401k plan is too much like a checkbox item. Seems okay, but might not really be.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited. I'm going to have you look at ours after this because you're going to do it for free for everybody that's listening, which I couldn't be more excited. I mean, nothing's better than free. But I have a long. So you're opening up Pandora's box, and I'm going to ask you a lot of specific questions. But let's. Can I say this real quick? Like what you're introducing is quite the disruption. This is disruptive. So that's number one. Number two, I kind of want to get our listeners all on the same page because while we've got mature dentists watching this, we also have a lot of kids in dental school that are watching this that might. Yeah. Can you get us all on the level plate? Why is this so important, not only for the young dentist, but also the mature dentist? Let's talk about the why first.
And let's take 401k plan off the table, and let's just first talk about your investments of any kind.
Right.
There's nothing more important about our money than knowing how much we have and where it is. Right. And if where it is invested, what are those investments costing us? So I speak to a lot of young docs right now. All they're doing is putting money into an IRA. That's good. They're getting into the habit of saving. Others might set up a simple capital SIMPLA IRA or a SEP plan, and they have not yet gotten to a 401k plan where it makes sense. Or they're investing their money in after-tax events or taxable accounts, The bottom line is you have to know what it's costing you. Because at the end of the day, and we could look at many billionaires or Warren Buffett who will say, all things being equal, invest in the index, try to cut out the middlemen. So to level the playing field for everybody in this audience is if you are putting money out of your pocket away somewhere, the absolute first thing you got to know is what are the costs of those investments.
Let me give you an example if I could, Tom. Let me give you this example, Kirk. Let me give you an example of two individuals. Let's say two guys out of dental school starting their practice, both age 35. Okay. Both have $100,000 to invest. And let's say they go to a guy one side of the block and then another guy on the other side of the block, but they both get the same returns, okay, 8%, same returns. But one pays 1% in fees while the other pays 3% in fees, okay? Now fast forward to age 65, the person who paid 3% in fees has $432,000 in their balance.
Okay.
They went from 100 to 432,000. The guy who paid 1% in fees has $761,000.
So he's doubling his money almost.
Almost twice as much money, but they both got the same returns, the same gross returns, but the fees are like a hole in your boat, right?
Right.
So, they're going to create that drag. And so the fees are going to be such a crucial component. And unfortunately, as Tom said, most people choose a financial advisor or choose a 401k plan based on a personal relationship, and that's understandable. I mean, that's the way we would do things. But unfortunately, the world is changing. I mean, if you're, over the age of 35, we all remember running into Blockbuster on a Friday night, standing there hoping to get there soon enough to get one of the copies right behind the little cardboard, right? So, and you get there too late, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So I don't think anybody who was standing there would have thought that, 10, 20 years from now, we would be all streaming. There'd never be any scarcity. We'd all stream the content. It would just be the new normal, right? In fact, Blockbuster's CEO didn't know it because he turned down the opportunity to buy Netflix for $50 million. So a little bit of a mistake, right? And by the way, he was the former CEO of 7-Eleven. So he had a brick and mortar mentality, right?
Yeah.
So we are in the exact same spot, Kirk, in the 401k space right now. This is Blockbuster. Most dentists have Blockbuster plans, right? They've got the old school plan, which is normal. It's not bad. It's just normal. But the 401k is undergoing a transition where there's no need for these middlemen. There's no need for brokers. There's no need for big fat commissions. There's no need for all these things anymore because technology and economies of scale and everything that comes along with this kind of new economy we live in. Right. So that's kind of where we are. So that's the core issue, if you will.
Yeah. Now that's huge. And how receptive, I got to ask, when you guys present this idea, do people go, okay, wait, this sounds so far out of the box? I would imagine you're going through violent resistance when you introduce this concept to a lot of people. And where is this coming from? Speak to that. I just naturally want to speak to natural resistance that you guys get.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. Last week, I sent out an email to a lot of our prospect base addressing this very fact because a lot of folks will come to us and say, this is too good to be true.
Right.
The foundation has changed. Like Josh has mentioned Blockbuster to Netflix. We could think a few years ago, flat screen TVs that were $6,000, now they're 400.
Right.
Who the heck has a long distance plan anymore? We all remember growing up, right? Don't stay on the line too long. This call is costing me $3, right? Well, that doesn't exist anymore. So those are things, consumer choices that affect us then and today. These are things that are going to affect our ability to sustain our financial lives, our ability to live comfortably and dignified whenever we stop working in whatever field we're in. So if we wouldn't want to make that change, why wouldn't we? And yet you bring up a wonderful point. We could oftentimes bring up empirical evidence why a change is good, but we'll often hear, I don't have time to get around to that, or I really like Joe the broker, or he's a good patient, which I push back on dentists and like say, what does that mean he's a good patient? He comes there twice a year for cleanings like you tell him to, right?
Yeah.
Is he giving you a lot of business, right? So there's the natural resistance to change, number one. There's also wondering maybe how can that happen? And again, it all has to do with what I talked about at the top, compensation. In our particular model and other ones like us that are very good, they're using a different core fund lineup now, where they're stripped of all embedded fees. And the primary fees in most investments are called 12B1 fees, which pays someone a commission, or a sub-TA fee, which pays some provider revenue sharing from the funds. A kickback. It's essentially a pay-to-play platform, right? So you could have a fund that has costs of 0.15% that are stripped of all those fees, or you could have that exact same fund that is 1.50% because those fees had to be put back in to pay the other third parties.
Right.
So it's candidly, because if we look at, close to 70% of 401k participants believe they pay no investment related fees at all. That gets to a root problem of another sort. We don't understand that a mutual fund or an index fund has an expense ratio attached to it. Many folks don't believe that those even exist. So it comes back to the basic math we're not learning early on, basic finance we're not learning early on. To go to my point where you have to know the cost of your investments, people don't think there are any. So when we shift the conversation to say, in our case, we're simply using a different foundation and building upon it with the services that are rendered across the board, and we strip all those fees out of there to not have to pay third parties, that's where it must be too good as to be true to be thing comes into play, because folks haven't entertained that there even could be funds like that. They are conditioned. They are conditioned to thinking it costs this much, so therefore it must cost that much. That's what I keep seeing. Think of Uber a few years ago, which is the same year we launched. For 100 years, you had to have a taxi cab. It came at a very indiscriminate time that you had to hail and fight along with other people. That was very expensive, and you didn't know actually what it was going to cost. That the inside was generally not very clean. Now, all of a sudden, the next day, you can book a ride and stand exactly where you want to stand, and it's a third of the cost, and they're giving you a bottle of water, and you're charging your phone, and it's a delightful experience, and there's no cash involved. How the heck did that happen one day to the next?
Well, and it's a time app. It's not really a transportation app. It's a time app. I press a button, somebody shows up. I save hundreds of hours over the course of my lifetime. So the convenience aspect of it is so powerful. And what you're saying is so true. Now, I got to just piggyback because my mind is exploding. Now, let me frame this up for dentists. Like some of you are watching this and you're in dental school. Here's what I want you to understand. You're going to practice for 4 decades. That's 40 years. Foreseeably, you're going to have $1 million a year minimum go in and out of your hands. So that's 40 million raw dollars that'll come into your business and pass through. So Josh, Tom, frame this up like some people, I don't want to throw everybody into this basket, but like saving early and starting with a really solid plan and not leaving this money on the table. Think about where you'll be at the age of 55 if you just do a few simple disciplines early in your career, where you end up and how much easier dentistry is going to be when you get to be 50.
Yeah. Josh, do you want to take that?
Yeah. Look, I think that the understanding the power of compounding is really what we're getting at, right? And starting early. That's the key. So I think there's 2 groups we're talking to. The people that have decided, that hey, they can't, most people have an excuse, right? They say, I can't afford to save now. I'll save later.
Right.
And that's an unfortunate one because I'll give you an example. If there was a tax today, right? If the government came out and issued a new 10% tax, we'd all bet you complain, right? But we'd all pay it. Okay, that's the
We
fact,
would, yeah.
right? We'd have to. Now you have to treat your future self in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You have to say this 10% is a tax on my future self. It is what it is, right? This is the way it's going to be. So that to me is the most important thing, is the discipline of setting it aside. Because if you can't save a dime out of a dollar, right, you're not going to save 10 out of 100, or, as you keep increasing your income. So that's going to be the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the component of fees becomes really, really crucial. And I wanted to give one example, Kirk, of an actual practice, because I think this might put it into frame for everybody. So a typical practice comes to us, and they already have a balance in their plan, right? So this particular practice had about $1 million in the plan. So that was, partially the dentist money, about 40%, and that was 60% the rest of the participants. And collectively as a team, they were adding about $100,000 a year to that plan. So when they came to us, they said, hey, we want to uncover the fees, right? And so what we do is we say, okay, let's look at the fees. And they were paying about 1.5% annually, which it's not great, but it's also not hugely bad. We can make a huge difference in that. But, we see plans up in 2 and closer to 3%, which is just absolutely egregious. But this group was paying 1.5%. Now, our plan for dentists is 0.5%, 0.5%. So this was, ours is about a third the cost. So what we're saying is, now let's just look at all things being equal. Okay? No, let's say you're going to get the same performance, whether you're with us or with your current plan. At the end of a 20-year period, there's 1.2 million additional dollars in our plan versus your current plan, just based on the fee savings. 1.2 additional million dollars that's now back into the hands of the dentist and the participants.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's astounding to people. So you asked about people's reactions. I think a lot of people go, how does this math work?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Which speaks to Tom's point about financial literacy, understanding the power of compounding, because it works both ways. It works positively and it works negatively. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you got fees compounding, those work against you. The easiest way to understand that is watch how quickly your credit card balances go up, right? If you're only paying the minimum interest payment.
Right. Right.
So this is an important component. So if you can understand how compounding works, and that's a layup for you to be able to take that and say, okay, wow, we have over $1 million back into the hands of the participants. So people have this reaction that says they don't believe it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or they have another reaction, which is, I'm angry that I didn't make the switch before. Let's move now,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's another common reaction. We get a lot of people to switch over. And then there's this cognitive dissonance reaction, which is unfortunate, where people say they feel bad, right? Or they feel like they made a poor decision to begin with, so they pretend like they didn't make a bad decision.
Mm-hmm.
And they go back to the broker, unfortunately, who, of course, tells them what? Tells them, hey, your Blockbuster video plan is just fine, right?
Yeah,
Everything's
right.
good. No need to worry.
Right.
And so that's an unfortunate decision, because that not only impacts the dentist, it impacts the participants.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just, their money, it's the money of the team. And so now you're impacting all these other families as well. So those are kind of the different reactions we get. And then, you know what? Then we get reactions where we have many, what we'll call our board of ambassadors, a bunch of dentists that say, this is insane. I'm so excited. They switch, and then they go out and they start pounding the drum in dentistry because they care. That's one of the coolest things for us being in this industry, is to watch how they don't treat each other as competitors. They treat each other as colleagues, and they go out and they want to make an impact in every dentist's life. And so they start telling the story and using their influence, much like we're doing today. So we're really excited about that reaction.
If I could piggyback off of Josh's point a little bit, Kurt, there's two things we're planning for or living for. We're living for today, right? We're getting our income. We're making income now that's building up. And for most Americans, we don't have residual or passive income. So what we accumulate during our working lives has to sustain ourselves. Mm-hmm. So when we do these comparisons in our business, is to give folks a look out 20 years. Mm-hmm. Because you can say, here's these fees and these fees. And somebody could say, oh, I'm at 1% and you're 0.5%, just to pick numbers, right? Oh, 0.5% doesn't mean anything. Well, until you take into account how much they have in their 401k plan, how much they're adding to it each year, that growth rate Josh mentioned, say 7%, which is the average of the S&P the last 20 years. And then the absolute key element becomes time.
Yeah.
Because time will tell you if the path you are leading yourself on is one that will take you off a cliff, or is one that's going to lead you to a place you want to be when you end up working.
Yeah.
And that becomes the visceral reaction when people see the numbers laying side by side, where it's usually for the first time they've ever seen anything related to their finances mapped out 20 years.
Yep.
That's when you see those reactions of disbelief or anger or embarrassment or frustration or wondering, oh my God, how am I going to tell this to my staff?
Yep.
But look, there's 600,000 401k plans out there. There's 34,000 with dentists. Most are like this.
Right.
It's because you've been funneled in to what is most common.
Right.
And we're saying break away from common because you are not common.
Right.
Your family is not common, right?
Yeah.
Your family's finances are not common. They're your finances. So go ahead and grab them.
Right. Now, speaking of reactions, we got people chiming in. So I love this. Like, this is a very hot topic. So our friend Deepak, what's going on, buddy? He always asks very thoughtful questions. He says, if one believes he will be earning more in retirement than at present due to numerous passive investments throwing off a lot of returns, would it be advisable to not fund or minimally fund your 401k because it seems it's designed assuming you are in a lower tax bracket at retirement than the present? Thoughts?
I can take it, Tom. I have two thoughts. One is I'll answer his a broader question and I'll get to his specific. I think that, many people say the 401k is broken.
Okay.
And I think that that's mistaking the suitcase for the contents, right? The 401k is not an investment. It's simply a receptacle, right? It's what's inside.
Right.
Right. So now what's inside can be a lot of really crappy funds, and I'll go into this in a bit, or they can be really high quality, low cost index funds, like the ones that, John Bogle and many others recommend, Warren Buffett. And they can perform extremely well over time.
Right.
I would say that to answer his question specifically, if you're of the belief that you're going to be in a higher tax bracket in the future, that doesn't generally happen, but a lot of people get scared about the future rising tax rates. But you could also take advantage of a Roth 401k. So many people are very much aware of a Roth IRA, and probably most of your listeners who are dentists think that they don't qualify for a Roth IRA because they make too much money, and that would be accurate, right? Usually when you make above a certain amount, you can only contribute that limitation, and then a Roth IRA doesn't work for you. But you can still make your 401k contribution, and you can check the box to make it a post-tax contribution, so it's a Roth 401k. Many people are unaware of this. You can contribute dramatically more than a Roth IRA, and now you've got tax-free growth and tax-free access on the back end. You just don't get the same tax break today.
Right.
So I would say it's diversification. Yeah, please, Tom.
Is that, it's rare, to his point, that folks are putting away passive and residual income opportunities. Number one, it's rare. But number two, there's a heck of a lot of other families involved. A dentist practice and the success of their practice is going to be dependent in very large measure due to their staff.
That's right.
If you look at Americans that do not have access to an employer-sponsored retirement plan, 75% of Americans have less than $1,000 saved for retirement. What does that give you? $600, $700. It's nothing. So dentists are altruistic by nature. I've got a great friend of mine. One of my closest friends here is a pediatrician. He's like, I got into pediatrics because I didn't want to be a businessman. I wanted to take care of people. Dentists are doing that for people's oral health as well. But there's other people's health they have to worry about too, and that's their staff that is helping their practice thrive. Yep. So the offering of the 401k plan is something that's going to have a residual effect to hundreds of thousands of families across all these 34,000 dentist plans we're talking about as well.
Amen. I'll piggyback on that, brother, and say, dentists, while they think about all the assets, the greatest asset you're ever going to have are those people around you. So totally agree with that. And there's good comments here. So I got to put on my glasses because I'm in the over 40 crowd here. So Kenny Burson said this, Tony Robbins spoke on this exact topic on fees being the killer to almost all 401ks, that with the lowest interest, low fee programs, it would make sense not to match from an employer and stay in the 3% fee 401k program, because low fee programs will make you more than the match with compounding interest. Thoughts on that? You want to piggyback on that?
Well, first of all, when you do the plan design of a retirement in the first place, most every dentist is going to have to set up what's called a safe harbor 401k plan, where there'll be a 3 or 4% match to protect the deferrals of the dentist, him or herself. So that's number one. Mm-hmm. When you go beyond that, a third bucket after deferrals and safe harbor would be discretionary profit sharing. And oftentimes it doesn't make sense to fund that until you're in your mid-40s or older, and your staff, as a general rule, younger than you, because we want to see the dentist get 80% of the total. Mm-hmm. So it kind of becomes, what do you want to do? A lot of folks are also looking at the 401k profit sharing plan as a security bucket. This is a place that I'm going to load it up, either in pre-tax or Roth. It's going to sit out there. It's going to be for my heirs. It's not my dream bucket. It's not necessarily my growth bucket if you have a brokerage account, for example, right? Mm-hmm. You're going after some returns, which is fine in after-tax accounts. But this is a security bucket. And so how you start to fund it and when you start to fund it more is often dependent on age. Most of our younger dentists that are starting plans in their 30s and early 40s, we're saying, Doc, just do your 401k and safe harbor. Mm-hmm. The combined between those two will be in the low to mid-20s. Maybe you're adding your spouse to it. That's a good start. You've got practice debt to get down. You've got educational debt to get down. Take care of those things. But as we talked about, the old adage of saving for a rainy day, I like to say, why not plan for a lot of sunny days as well? In those days you put down your tools, there has to be that bucket you can draw from. So we don't suggest that for any particular practice, this is the only way to do it. You want to look at the demographics, see what's important to you, where you are at the stage of your life, and the way we design the plan could be completely different today than 8 to 10 years from now as you grow into it. One of the rare good things about getting older is the retirement plan design starts to work a heck of a lot better for you.
And Tom, maybe you could talk a little bit about, many dentists are unaware of what's called a cash balance plan, something you can layer in on top and put away a couple $100,000 tax deductibly as well.
Yeah, a lot of dentists come to us and they'll say, I've maxed out my 401k profit sharing at $55,000. What can I do now? Well, a cash balance plan is a type of a defined benefit plan. The primary differences are that there's some commitment involved, meaning where I mentioned profit sharing can be discretionary. If you add on a cash balance plan, you're really looking at a 5-year increment that you're going to agree to fund it. But as you start getting into your mid-40s to 50s, to Josh's point, you're now putting on top of that $55,000 maybe another $130,000 to $235,000, $240,000 on top. Those dollars start to accumulate to where the total dollar amount in the cash balance plan can be about $2.8 million right now. You can't exceed that. But talk about putting in an accelerated bucket, which, oh, by the way, maybe reduced your tax liability to 30, 40% along the way as well, depending on what bracket you're in. So we've seen more and more dentists as they've gotten older, adding those plans on top of the 401k profit sharing plan to combo it, piggyback on top. You're really accelerating your savings buckets. Again, it's personal interest, right? Do you look at this security bucket and say, I want to fully fund this thing as much as I can. It's protected from creditors. It's another area where I can look to and say, post 59 and a half, look what I've accumulated for myself. If you can do so, there's reasons to do so.
Yeah. Are you amazed by the number of people that don't know about that? Because I am. I have a lot of dentists that have done a lot of homework and they're very aware. But then there are other people that I'm like, you're 55. That's an option. Are you surprised by that? Not so surprised? I'm just curious.
They're kind of quiet out there. There's a lot of folks I'll speak to. I spoke at the Dental Town conference a couple of weeks ago, and when we started talking about cash balance plans, there was a lot of blank eyes. What the heck is that thing, right? Mm-hmm. We can say defined benefit plan. When we think of defined benefit plan, our latent thinking goes to pension plans. My father worked in a steel mill for 40 years. The mill or the factory is going to take care of you after you stop working. It's a pension plan. You didn't contribute to it. That's kind of what these are. They're a hybrid. Right. But because they're not as overtly promoted per se, you've got a large part of the populace that hasn't heard about them. Now, again, they're not going to work really well until, as a general rule, when you're in your early 40s to mid 40s. That's when it starts to ramp up the effectiveness of it. So we like to say grow into it. Get to the point where you can max out your 401k and your profit sharing plan. Let age start to work in your favor and add on this new plan design. It is all about awareness. Look, doctors, I wrote to a lot of dentists last week, and doctors that we speak to is saying, okay, you just got really annoyed paying that tax bill, didn't you? And you looked at your tax liability, and I put this actually on a Facebook post, and we had about 40 responses back from people that said, tell me about this cash balance thing because I don't know anything about it.
Oh, and it's so fun because right after April 15th, I always have a couple of people that we've been coaching. They've jumped a few tax brackets, and that's when that's when they get the most disgruntled. Like, do you know how much I just wrote to the government? And so I'm like, yeah, congratulations. You're one of our best taxpayers.
That's on right. That point now, if adding one of these things, as long as you have the plan document signed by December 31st of this year, then you could fund it in 2019 for 2018. So if your listeners who say, maybe I should find out if one of these things are for me, we're not burning any daylight really in the calendar here in April, but something that we simply get a census and we run illustrations and determine the effectiveness based upon your demographics today. And that may change because if you've got one 59-year-old or 62-year-old on your staff or a couple of them, and then they retire in the next year or two, the complete complexion of the plan design can change so much more in your favor. So your demographics today and the look we give you at it is maybe not going to be a complete better look at it 2 years from now if you've had some staff turnover. So we always want to be not looking at history. We want to look at present.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the pitfalls when you look at all of this in the future? And I also want to get a good idea of what you guys are seeing and what the future might look like, because a lot of people watching this have been through a lot of our boomers, when the market crashed, they started doing the math and they figure out, gosh, I'm going to have to work a lot longer. Everyone's always asking me what the future looks like. And I'm like, hey, I don't know. Let's ask the experts. What do you think the future looks like? So that's a two-part question: pitfalls and then the future.
Josh?
Well, how about this? I think that the future is going to change in the 401k landscape. I think you're going to see a lot of the old guard. Let me give you an example. I think the first thing to self-diagnose high fees, you got to look at the old big brand names, okay? Mm-hmm. So they're going to talk about insurance companies, right? All your name brand insurance companies: John Hancock, Nationwide, Transamerica, AXA, Voya. Those are typically those kind of name brand insurance companies that, plaster their names on blimps and stadiums are typically the ones that you're paying for those signs. Okay. Mm-hmm. So those are typically, and also ADP and Paychex, payroll companies. They have, sold their way in on making easy integration for payroll, and then they sell 401k right in after it. And those 401k plans have also, can have some pretty substantial fees. So that's just a good for your listeners to say, hey, how do I self-diagnose? How do I know if I might have 401k fees? Let's start there. So I think the landscape is going to change by the brands that are going to come into that space. Yep. I think that, as Tom mentioned, these firms have built a platform that pays brokers first and then gets kickbacks from mutual funds. So unless they entirely revamp their model, I think they're ripe for major disruption. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. I think as it relates to the market, one of the most important things that and when you'll read in Unshakable, if you get a free copy of this when we give it to you, you'll one of the things that Tony wanted to do was kind of dispel the fear. And he went through and said, there's some freedom facts, if you will, that will help you understand how markets behave. Mm-hmm. Because, let me just give you a couple. For example, a market correction is a 10% drop, but not more than 20%. Okay, that would be a bear market. Mm-hmm. Corrections have happened once a year on average since 1900. Once a year, you have a correction. That's pretty substantial. Yep. And bear markets happen every 3 to 5 years. So, and yet the market has continually moved on to new highs, right? So, and if you were the unluckiest investor and you invested on the day before the market collapsed in 2008, and you're still up way more than 125% today. Mm-hmm. So I think the most important component of understanding, now obviously you don't want to be just invested in U.S. markets, et cetera. So I think the point of understanding, these markets is to understand that corrections are a constant, understanding that bear markets are a constant. It's people who feel and get reactive who are often the people that lose money. people say, oh, I lost all my money in the stock market. I said, well, the stock market is a month ago was at an all-time high. Mm-hmm. So the only way you lost money in the stock market is if you didn't own all the broad stocks, you were a stock picker, which is kind of a fool's errand, or you sold, right? So it's a self-inflicted injury, right? Mm-hmm. If the market's making new highs, the only way you lost money is if you sold. So to me, understanding how markets behave is important. Number two, I would say that good investors understand that corrections and constants are a part of the game. Corrections are a constant, and bear markets are a part of the game. But great investors look forward to those times. And what I mean by that is, if I don't know what your favorite car is, Kirk, but let's just say it's a BMW. If BMWs were on sale for 50% off tomorrow, mm-hmm. I bet you'd be down at the dealership.
Yeah, but I drive an old beat up pickup truck. No, just kidding. But I get what you're saying. Like one of the things is really getting a good mindset around this, because I've said this dollar cost averaging is one of the greatest things. When it goes down, even oh my gosh, it's going down. Everything's on sale. It's all on sale.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. People, exactly. Americans love everything that's on sale except stocks.
Right.
Exactly. So that's a really important component is to consider.
The biggest thing though, Kirk, is that we have to get an emotional attachment to the fact we're going to be old.
Yeah.
We're going to maybe live 20 or 30 years from the time we stop working. And the only way that's going to be an enjoyable time for ourselves and our families is if we've accumulated enough savings to sustain ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's why it's keeping an eye on the ball today, but also knowing there's a ball you're going to want to hit forward, right?
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of docs will say to me, when should I start? When should I start investing? And, I've got all this practice debt and I have this educational debt. I'll say, then just an IRA, even if it's just $5,500 a year, just get into the habit of paying yourself something.
Yeah.
And then when situations dictate that you can accelerate it, do so, right?
Absolutely. I love stories from the other side of the fence. So I run into Bill Lockhart every once in a while, and he's got to be close to 90. And he always tells me, Kirk, keep these guys working. I saved a ton of money, but I never realize how much money I spend when I don't go to work, like going to Costco. I wake up, I spend so much money because I'm accustomed just to good life. And that's an important thing. Now think about this. Is you're a dentist, you're the top 1% of earners, but over a career, like the amount of money that you can save, you got to make sure that you can sustain that life beyond the other side of the fence, which is a whole other ballgame. And with the advancements in prescription medication, what's happening in healthcare, there's a good chance we're going to keep you around for a long time. Right. And my guess is you're going to run out of money. Like, no, 1 in 3 babies that's born today is actually going to live to be 100. Nobody is saving enough money to outlast that in some respects. But
get this. This is crazy. If you look at it on the fees, go back to fees for a second.
Yeah.
If you take two individuals over and this is on our website, but you can take two individuals over a lifetime of saving, of growing, and then drawing down their savings, right?
Right.
If they have the same performance, on average, the person who has 1% less in fees will run out of money 10 years later than the same performance than the other individual.
Wow.
So it's not just about accumulation; it's about when you draw it down too. So that becomes a serious issue.
Yeah.
And that's when we do these occasional side-by-side comparisons for dentists. We did one for a dentist in Idaho last week, where for her practice, it would have been a matter of leaving approximately $1.7 million on the table for the little broker in that little town and that one of those insurance companies Josh mentioned, that 1.7 would have resided in their pockets versus this dentist, her husband and children, and their 7 staff. And that number, you can tell she felt it. It almost took her breath away to knowing that if I don't make this little 2 millimeters of change, I would literally leave that money on the table for some stranger to pick up and place in their pockets. And it's ungodly that we see people that, not just dentists, but across all businesses, presented with that evidence and then just wait. We had somebody come on with us last week who I first spoke to 1,462 days ago. And
good. It's good that they do move, and a lot do move quickly. I mean, a lot do move right away, but some, you're right. He
was saying, hey Tom, could you do some backwards math and tell me how much did I leave on the table since I spoke to you 4 years ago? And I said, Joe, this is going to be pretty painful. I don't know you want to hear it, and it hurt because he was just like, oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah.
So these are little things. This is not surgery. This is talking about a little bit of paperwork over a course of 5 weeks, and you leave something in the rearview mirror that was going to crush your family versus not.
Right. And that was one of my next questions. Like, is this extremely difficult? Now, you guys are going to make it easy to do a simple analysis, but like sometimes dentists are motivated or not motivated by the fact that this is going to be difficult. So speak to that. Yeah,
and it's really not. And our model is somewhat unique in that we put a specialist one-to-one for every practice owner. Mm-hmm. So after some initial paperwork, and it literally takes 5 to 7 minutes to get the ball rolling, within 48 hours, we assign a conversion specialist whose sole job then for that dentist is to convert that plan from their existing provider or providers.
Yeah, so you do nothing. We do all the heavy lifting.
We get a copy of their plan document to map over all the various provisions. We collect a census from either the dentist or somebody on their staff. We engage with the existing providers to prepare termination letters and facilitate the transfer of the existing assets over. This all happens over the course of 5 to 6 weeks. There literally is not much for them to do. But at the end of that process, it dictates a cause for celebration. Right. Because if you look at the business owners, any business owner, their latent responsibility under the law is that as the fiduciary of the plan, you must ensure the plan is for the sole benefit of its participants, and that fees must be both reasonable and prudent. And if they're not, you are required to take action. Because if you didn't, I had a dentist a month and a half ago who took our fee comparison and showed it to his staff. And his staff almost mutinied when they said to her, why have we not made this change? Because this is our money too. So we have to feel the importance of our fiduciary obligation to do the right thing. Right. And it can't be because I'm too busy or Joe the broker brings really good donuts and takes me to nice golfing. He's a wonderful guy. We socialize with him. It can't be all the things that sound like I'm just going to put this off. There has to be real reasons why you would justify staying.
Right. And to your point about Kirk about ease of the process. The old model, the Blockbuster Video model was corral everybody into a cafeteria and the lunchroom and give them some brochures and some stale donuts and try to teach them about their 401k plan. And that's really the old model. Now it's all driven through kind of a high-tech, high-touch model where you can have one-to-one advice at any time. So you're not going to talk about your finances in front of your colleagues, right? But you could go to your car at lunch break and have a one-on-one conversation with an advisor about your particular situation. Or you can also interact we have live video and everything on every device, phones, iPad, everything. You can enroll when you're sitting there waiting for your kid at soccer practice. You can just make it super easy, which it seems like everything should be that way since that's basically how the world works these days. But the 401k industry is going to move very slowly into the 21st century.
And Josh, your point about the Blockbuster model that is sold by the brokers, they're going to continue to say, yeah, but those 2 times a year I'm out there, when I'm bringing that stack of paper this big that you'll never read, and those donuts and bagels, that's really worth my compensation of 100 basis points. It's worth it out. Well, you don't want to use, why the heck do you want to use an iPad when you're going to see me twice a year?
Yeah. and well, I'm just going to speak to this too, Josh. I think it was your dad that coined the phrase, the 7 most expensive words in business are, that's the way we've always done it or something like that. So a lot of people are going to be thinking, this is so different. I've done it all the other way. So
sure.
You guys can make this easy. Now, a couple things, gosh, I got so many things that I would. So if you're looking at this, you guys have offered a free link that if you can do a side-by-side comparison, it doesn't take a lot. So can you just speak about what that is? And you're also going to offer a copy of Tony's book. What are these 2 things?
Yeah, if you visit findmyfees.com, super simple. There's a little video there and there's a little form, and it's take it 2 seconds to fill out the form. And what we're looking for is we can't look under the hood of your plan unless you give us a copy of your fee disclosure. Most people don't know where it is. They've never even read it before or seen it. And that's okay. I didn't read the closing documents on my home either. So, but what this is an opportunity for you to reach out to the provider. I wouldn't reach out to the broker, to be honest with you, because the broker will say, why are they asking for a fee disclosure? I'd reach out directly to your provider. So if it's John Hancock or Massachusetts, whatever it is, you can reach out directly. And we actually give you the 800 number of your provider right there. and we'll let you know exactly where to find it. It'll take you 3 minutes to find your fee disclosure. They'll email it to you. That is going to be 30 to 50 pages, and you won't understand it, but we will. So we do as Tom calls it, the archaeology to go through and uncover all the fees you're paying, and we add them all together, and we give you a side-by-side comparison to say, here's your fees, and here's what your fees could be, and here's the impact over time. And then also we show you all the other benefits. You're going to get access to low-cost index funds and no commissions, all those great things. So we walk you through that as well. And if you do that, when it comes through, we're going to track it. So we're going to, send a copy of Unshakable, in the mail as well when you hit that website. And feel free to share it with other colleagues as well. We're happy to give that offer to them as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Super great.
And a lot of dentists will tell you, we don't BS people at this point. The stunningly sad part is that only about 3 times of every 300 plans we review, Kurt, can we say, wow, you've got a great plan. Stay where you are. In our altruistic nature, it would be great if there were more plans that were fantastic. But it's just not, because those 600,000 plans are mostly sold by the broker insurance companies, Paychex, ADP, and a couple of fund companies. So we know when a dentist submits a request and there's $600,000 in the plan and they're with American funds, for example, I can tell you with almost near certainty that their average investment-related expenses are going to be 1.55%. Why? That's a product that they get slotted in with that provider. So we know it. So we would like to tell them more often. But if it is a great plan, we're not going to be self-serving. We're going to say, hey, doc, what you did at least was you fulfill your fiduciary obligation to benchmark your plan on a regular basis. Now you can sleep at night if the Department of Labor ever comes knocking on your door and say, have you ever done that before? Yeah, we did, and we're good. Or yeah, we did, and we found out it wasn't, and we immediately made a change. So it's worthwhile.
Yeah, I love it, guys. I'm so grateful that you guys are on. We're going to have you back for a couple other subjects and cover, but we wanted to cover this topic today. Any final thoughts that you guys would offer to our listeners? Just final words of wisdom.
Well, I would
go ahead, Tom.
I would say from our end, there's 34,000 dentists out there with 401k plans. We recently crossed 400. We'd like to help 34,000 dentists at least get that look under the hood that Josh mentioned. Just sleep better at night. So take advantage of it, right? We respect your existing relationships. We know people like to do some things local because that's the people they run into in their small town. And that's great. But at the end of the day, when you're alone and you're 75 or 80 years old and you're looking at how much you have to sustain yourself, your providers aren't going to be around. And neither are those people. So take care of yourselves and take care of your families today. Take care of your staff and their families today. Whether it's with us or someone, if you can do better, do better.
Yeah, and I'd say get excited about it, right? Get excited about what you could recoup, right? At the end of the day, if you're going to have $500,000 or $1 million more in your pocket just due to eliminating some fees, what's that going to mean to you? What's it going to mean to your life? What's that going to mean to your ability to give, to to charity, to your kids, to your legacy, whatever it is you want to do. So, I would imagine that if your listeners are podcasters, they're listening to all sorts of ways to reduce their overhead and drive more profit to the bottom line and get more efficient. Well, I would probably argue that you haven't listened to a podcast, at least this week, that with one, kind of move of the finger, you could recoup that kind of money to the bottom line for you and your staff. So yeah, get excited about it. And we're excited to engage with you.
Yeah, I love it, guys. I'm so grateful. This is great advice, a lot to think about. If you're a younger dentist, you're going to be doing this for a long time. And if you're a mature dentist, protecting the future and protecting the people you employ is so critically important. And so I am so grateful again, guys. Thank you for everything. We're going to have you back on some future podcasts. So stick around while we say goodbye to everybody else. But hey, guys, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate your comments and your feedback. If you enjoyed today, just do us a huge favor and hit the share button, share it with your friends. And until we see you next time, keep watching the Best Practices Show. You guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.